Hey, I'm Molly Sims.
And I'm Emma Gormley. We're two girls obsessed with one thing, beauty.
And by that, we mean everything that makes you look
And feel
beautiful.
We're calling on our favorite health experts, industry insiders, and friends to answer all your beauty questions.
With a drink in hand.
Definitely with a drink in hand.
You're listening to Lipstick on the Rim with Molly Sims.
And you guys know we love momming. We love being a mom. It's so easy.
Yeah, it's just so easy. I mean,
until it's not.
It's hard, and
It's
social
hard.
media does not help us.
No. Well, today's guest is here to help us navigate the complexities of parenting by cutting through all the noise, all the shit, all the over information found online. She's a returning guest. I just want to preface by saying I work with both Aliza and Bronwyn for off and on for the past 12 years. She is a developmental psychologist, Aliza Pressman. We love you. She's an award-winning podcast, Raising Good Humans. It is a podcast that is a wealth of information that she can help you navigate through the toddler years all the way up to the teen years.
It's the best podcast.
It's
truly.
the best
It's the only
podcast.
one I listen to outside of true crime.
And this year she had her
Murder and Children.
she had her book come out, The 5 Principles of Parenting, Your Essential Guide to Raising Good Humans. I highly recommend it. It is an incredible tool that just, it's the gift that keeps on giving. It is by my nightstand and it is in my office. Today's episode.
Thanks,
okay, guys,
true.
we're going to simplify parenting. We're going to build confidence. The principles of being a good parent, how to do that, how to build confidence, instill gratitude, and support connection. And I send articles of Aliza to Rosie, our producer, and I'm like, this is what. There's like 20 articles because we're not going to be able to battle all of them today. So go to her podcast, Raising Good Humans. But today we really want to talk about just some tools that we're both needing. And it's at the beginning of the year. The holidays are over. The fucking wheels are off. It's off. We're in, we're
aiming to make 2025 our best year yet.
our best year
including
yet.
parenting.
We're going to
So-
be great moms. We're going to be, we are going to crush it.
We are. We're crushing it. We're crushing it.
When we scream at them at the top of our lungs.
Yeah.
She told her kids before Christmas, she had to come out here. And she told her kids before Christmas, she goes, if you're not careful, I'm not coming back. It was a great parenting moment.
Really solid parenting.
Did they believe you?
Lily, maybe.
You have
I had to FaceTime
dedicated
her a couple of times.
You have dedicated your career to supporting parents. How, was there something in your research that sparked this need? We're going to take it back a little.
You know what? I think I was studying developmental psychology, so like how humans grow from birth through adolescence and the lifespan. But every time I was looking at anything, there were all these things that were more about like either you can't do anything, it just is, or there's environmental things that you can do to help support kids. And the biggest environment that influences kids is the parenting environment. So I got kind of into it. Plus, I got pregnant in graduate school. So I think it made me shift from like looking at children as safari animals because I was a graduate student, just like fascinated by it, and to actually being like, wait a minute, how does all of this research even matter in your day-to-day?
But I think that's what you and Bronwyn, you guys are so great about, I work with you guys. So disseminating information that you can take back to your family that works. And I think, which is why we want to talk about the topic of simplifying parenting, because there's such an overload of information on parenting due to social media, due to, everyone criticizing, oh, I do it this way. Oh, I do it this way. Can you elaborate on like why it's so important to have simplifying parenting than ever before?
I think our kids, like there's a lot of talk of how anxious kids are right now. There's
We
a
just
lot
talked
of,
about that.
We just
Yeah.
talked about it.
And I think how could, let's set aside that there are certain genetic, some people come out of the womb a certain way. But in terms of the world that we're living in right now, the adults in the world are absolutely unhinged. That's not a professional term.
But I use that word all the time. I think everyone's unhinged half the time.
It just feels like a lot, and including parenting, right? It just feels like we're on such overdrive. And so for kids, I think they need to see that this is not some kind of massive undertaking apart from the emotional, like, of course, you're raising humans that they're your humans. So of course it's
You're
stressful.
responsible. Our friend just had a baby who works with me on the WISE team, and it's so crazy. I'm like, now you are responsible
For that whole human.
for that whole human.
Yeah.
And it's hard to not think and worry constantly that like one thing you say can
Right.
screw them up. Like that is my
of course.
biggest fear. Like,
But it's never going to be true. Like there's never the one thing. I just want to say that here in case people don't finish the episode. It's never one thing. And it's about, like, if you think of in a very clinical way, dose and duration, like most things don't matter when they happen sprinkled in here and there. You yell at your kids that you're maybe not coming back. But they know that you love them.
Yeah.
Of course you are. And you just were pissed.
Yeah.
That's why, but if it's pervasive, like it's constant, that's going to do something. But I've had moments where I've thought, this is the moment, this is the thing where they look back and they're like, I can't believe this was the moment that I cut ties with my mother. But then I remember that that's nonsense. And so I think when it's not simple, because it is simple, it's like very simple science. It's hard as humans to make things simple because we are not simple people, but the actual science is simple. I mean, that's why I said 5 principles.
Okay, let's talk about them.
I think that it could seem like there's audacity to be like, in the whole field of developmental science, there are 5 things that matter for parents in order to raise kids that, like have the outcomes that we're hoping. So there was some audacity, except that every colleague I checked with was like, oh yeah, like it's not like I came up with these. The science is like, here are 5 of the most important things that we've learned through the decades that we actually have in our control as parents or caregivers. And those are relationship, reflection, regulation, rules, and repair. And if you are like checking in with yourself that those are the things that you are doing more often than not in any response to anything, whether you're talking about a toddler or a teenager, or frankly, a partner, that's it. That's kind of all you need. Everything else is sort of minutia details that might make your life easier that day. So I'm so for it. But it's not going to impact long-term outcomes for your kids, which is the thing that I think gets to us.
Yeah.
We think the small things that we're doing or not doing are going to mess up our kids, those small moments. And sure, accumulated over time, they matter, but it's because they fall into the category of, bolstering or diminishing the relationship, reflection, pausing before you actually make a decision about how you're reacting, regulation. So having sort of a capacity to distinguish between real and imagined threats so that you can actually do the thing you are supposed to do in that moment for yourself and for your kids versus the thing that you're kind of automatically doing out of fear. And then rules are just limits and boundaries that everybody needs to feel like things are going to be okay.
Structure.
And yes, exactly. And it's hard. It's hard because it feels like it's not consistent with a close relationship because you're like, but they're sobbing to me that I'm ruining their friends because I don't, their friendships because I'm not letting them have Snapchat or something.
You're not letting them have a phone.
Exactly.
That you're going to run my life.
Exactly. And so then we start to get insecure about those rules. And then, those are the things that are complicated. But the simplicity is rules. We need them. They need to be consistent. They need to matter. And if they don't matter, don't make them. And then repair for when you screw everything up. And truly, it's just this over and over and over. And you could think about it from toilet training to, like a bully to not getting to go to a party that you wanted to go to, or if you're, just like the range of things. And so I feel like it is quite simple. That's robust science from decades and decades and decades of resilience research, not like what's current now, but like what's been replicated and it's decades and we're still finding it to be true. It's more like that.
So talk about relationships. I think that to me is, the golden one, right? I think
Yes.
if you have a really strong relationship with your kids, my biggest fear sometimes is my oldest and I have a very close relationship. She tells me everything. And I love that, but I also don't believe in being my child's best friend at this age, right? Yeah. So how do you navigate having that bond, having that relationship? I want her to feel like she can come to me because I did not have that growing up, right? Not in a bad way, but I came from a very disciplined, very Eastern European immigrant family. So how do you navigate maintaining that relationship, having her come, and also,
boundaries,
having the boundaries in place and rules in place? And, there are situations where I have to sort of tell her how to do things, but I also want her to kind of come to it on her own. Like, how does one navigate that?
Well, first, I think just the best friend worry is that the thing that distinguishes best friend from just really close relationship that's appropriate is that a best friend is reciprocal and it's mutual. If you're not going to her with your problems and saying like, can you make me feel better? You're not her best friend. It's one-sided. She's coming to you and you're receiving and listening and empathizing and connecting. But you're not like a best friend where it goes both ways.
Daddy annoyed me today and I need you to,
let me tell you about my problems, number one. So she doesn't feel like she has to care for you.
No, she doesn't.
No.
You're like, certainly not.
I'd be in trouble.
And number two, that you can, and this is from what you're saying, it sounds like the hardest part is how do you distinguish between when she's opening up to you and when you have to say, like, I'm really glad you told me that, and also I'm still not letting you do X.
Yeah.
And that's just practice. Like, that's just, we exercise that muscle. We see that the relationship survives the moment of tension, the running away from you, the slamming the doors that can happen as they get older.
The attitude,
all of it. But that
Brooks told me, he was like, you don't own my hair. I'm like, what?
You're like, I
kind of do.
There's
I'm going to let him get the perm. But again, I think
he got a perm. Is that a thing?
It is. You know what? And I got really good advice.
To sidetrack.
I got really good advice from Robin Cassidy. She has two beautiful, incredible humans, freshmen, here in Los Angeles. And she was like, he's asking for a perm.
Yeah, who cares?
Who
is really
gives a
it.
shit? Yeah.
I'm just startled by the fact that perms happen.
I know. By the way, I gave him the best perm out there. But it is hard to hold the line. He is graduating from 6th grade. Maeve, Maeve has an Apple Watch. Everyone has an Apple Watch, Mom. Everyone gets a phone. And, at the end of 6th grade, graduation, we go to a very small little elementary school in California. Everyone gets it. And I'm like,
doesn't matter.
We'll see. I haven't made the decision up, but we have rules and we're going to abide by them.
Yeah, and those rules have to align not with everybody else's values, but with your household values.
Yeah. And how do you, if you wanted your rules to, I think that was what was so interesting about, Jonathan Haidt. Like, he was a real proponent of getting another mom on board with you, then getting another mom on board with you, and then getting another mom on board with you to kind of set those regulations. You're like, you know what? James over there, he's not getting the phone either.
Well, it's always easier to have support within, your cohort. But kids, the way they view it is like everybody. They say everybody. But if you took a poll, it's not everybody, ever. But also, I think the exercise is to stop trying to convince our kids that the rules that we have are awesome. Like, they're not awesome. They're terrible for them in their mind. So, like, let it go. You don't need to sell it. It is your rule. You can give the reason why, because you should have a good reason. Otherwise, it's a waste of attention point. But we don't need to sell any of that. It's like, this is our values in this household, and here's why we're doing it. And I completely expect that you're going to hate it. And that's also appropriate.
It's also developmental on where they are, starting to push back.
And that's, I think, the hardest part I see as a parent right now, specifically with my oldest, is friendships. and
Yeah.
friend groups, right?
Navigating
and
that.
navigating that because I think, you can see your kids sometimes get hurt or disappointed by something. I think, specifically to Maeve, like she's got a friendship group, right? Like a little group. And I'm always like, but she's still friends with other kids
Yeah.
that are not in that group, but within school. And I think this is something that my girlfriend's school had a talk, and it was called Clicks and Thrones.
That's a great
Clicks
title.
and Thrones. I love that.
And it's really like kind of, and I'm trying to figure out how to navigate it, right? Because I do think that I want her to have her circle of friends, because I think that's really nice when you have a group. But I think they're at this age where the exclusivity of that group is tough. So how do you suggest parents navigate that with their kids? And like, what advice can I give to her?
And also, I'm going to follow up that I don't believe that sometimes the parent should be involved
Yeah.
in certain situations when they will just figure it out.
Yeah, I think a lot of this, so let's use the 5 principles. You have a close relationship, so you're going to hear, they're going to come to you with, let me tell you what happened. So now they say something where your brain is like, oh my God, you left someone out at the lunch table. I'm going to have a mean kid. I'm going to have one of those mean girls. When they're in high school, they're going to be, and so you go into, so you have to reflect, like, what is happening for me right now? What does my child actually need in this moment? But like, what's happening for me? What was my experience like when I was in 4th grade? Did I feel excluded? Like all those thoughts. This is you not saying anything to your kids, but it gets you to pause before you end up saying something like, no, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And so then you can be regulated when you come in for the conversation. And you can, in that case, like with peers, it's a lot of listening, because you want them to always feel like they can tell you things, that your face isn't giving away that you're horrified or shocked to the point where they're going to stop telling you things.
Yeah.
So this, especially in elementary school, it's a long game, and you're there less to help them cultivate these friendship dynamics and more to be the person that they can come to about any of them. Because when there's a real emergency, you will know. Most of it is not a real emergency. They're just being sometimes jerky, or someone's being a jerk to them.
And it also regulates. It also works itself out. I think when sometimes it blows up to where the parents get involved, and then it becomes something that it shouldn't.
It's very rare that parents need to get involved at this point. Very rare. Most of the time.
And sometimes you're not going to be invited to the sleepover, and it's okay.
That's the biggest thing is FOMO.
Times. Yeah. Many times.
Talk to us a little bit about that, because the parents get more upset than the child.
Well, that's why we have to reflect and breathe before we do anything, because we're like, either we're feeling like the flood of that feeling we had when we were left out, or we're feeling that panic that we have the kid who's doing the leaving out, or all of those things. Separately from the moments of the sleepover party or whatever, you can talk to your kids and act in your life in a way that treats people with openness and kindness, that's a value in your household. But in the heat of the moment of something like getting excluded from a sleepover party, you're there to hear them cry and put, like ask them, what movie they want to watch and what food to order in. And also to say to them, so tell me, like, when you, or, if it's about who they invited, when you made that list, tell me, are there any consequences? Do you feel like that's a good list?
Yeah.
So you're helping them think through these things, but you're not giving away what to do. And again, you have to be able to distinguish when there's an emergency situation. Feeling crappy is not an emergency.
Yeah.
Feeling left out, not an emergency. Those things are just part of the normal wear and tear of life. And I would even say, if you can't get okay enough to manage that in ourselves, if we can't handle that and we want to fix it, call the parent, get them invited, what we're doing is setting them up for the pain of being older and finding out that we can't, because you can't fix it in high school, right? You can't fix it in college.
They have their own lives.
You cannot, you could never call up a parent and say, my kid's really bummed out not to be invited to the 10th grade, whatever. You have to sit back and watch them experience a lot of hard stuff. And if they've never felt little pangs of it before, it feels much harder, much bigger. So fixing it in the short term, is a Band-Aid that actually is not good for them.
Do you think kids actually want to hear you give the solution, or do you think they just want to be able to share?
I mean, some kids, if we've given too many solutions over time, they can become dependent on the solutions. Like, just tell me what to do. But I think for the most part, when people come, think about when we go talk to one of our friends, when you guys talk to each other, most of the time, you'll say if you're looking for a solution, you'll say, what should I do? But usually it's not that. That is not the question.
You just want someone to listen.
Yeah, you just want someone to listen. And you can be straightforward with your kids. Do you want my advice or do you want me to just listen?
I remember listening to one of your podcasts and you talked about that. And I thought that's like what I always try to reflect in the moment.
It's hard because we have good advice.
Let's first talk social media.
Okay.
When is it acceptable? When should you give the phone?
I mean, I would separate very much phone from social media.
Yeah.
Like, phone is the first step, and they have to get really good at being responsible with the limits that you set around the phone before you're even considering social media. And one of those limits is making sure they don't sneak and download an app, because it means they don't have the skill yet to regulate themselves to have the phone. And maybe you start with, I'm going to give you a phone for when I need you to have a phone. Like, I'm dropping you off at the mall. I want you to be able to reach me. I'm giving you this phone. But you're not going to keep this phone all day or have access to it when I don't choose. Because this is a me convenience. You can start with that. And you can also just have it be a different kind of phone that doesn't have all of the bells and whistles. But if you're at that sort of middle school point where you feel like, well, I could, but I don't know. I always want to remind people, the genie's not out of the bottle once you offer this. You can take it back anytime.
Yeah.
And you can set the rules.
I think parents think they can't.
I know. They're like, well, it's that ship sailed. I'm like, no, unless they're paying the bills and living outside of the house, it didn't sail.
But I also think one of the mistakes I see a lot of parents make, and again, this is not me judging, it's just what I've seen, is they let their kids take the phone to their room.
After you have a phone and you decide when they have it, you'll graduate to they can have it except for when they can't.
Yeah.
Because you have certain household rules, like certainly no mealtime. If it's in the bedroom, not at night. And whenever, like it's taking away from an otherwise better connection. So that doesn't leave as much time for the phone. So you might say it's not allowed in your bedroom, so that if they're going to sort of scroll on their phone, they have to do it right in the living room and in front of you. But you might also, as they're getting older, stop feeling that way. But you might say, it just can't be in your room past this hour. Or, I'm taking it right away after school so that you can just like decompress without thinking that phone equals being able to decompress. And then you can have it for this amount of time. I mean, it's actually the area where I think we struggle the most with boundaries for some reason, but the one we need the most around. And I actually don't think once it's a non-negotiable, like once you're not in an argument about it, because you're like, I don't care what the argument is. Yeah. This is what we're doing. It stops being like a source of
combative.
Yeah. But you also have to think about, who's my kid? There are plenty of kids who are like not that into their phone.
Yeah.
And it's not worth arguing about. Like if you came in the house and you were like, we're changing all the rules, but they're like, my phone's not even in here.
Right.
Yeah.
Like pick something that they actually have a weakness and need.
Parent also to that child.
Exactly.
Because you talk about, children need different parenting.
Temperament matters. And so if you have a kid who is going to pick up that phone and not let go of it ever again.
Brooke Stuber.
That's important.
Mr. Popular.
Yeah.
He will. I mean, can you imagine him with the phone?
Yeah.
His perm.
And his perm.
He's very, he loves people. He's a very
Well, that might
sweet.
protect him though, right? Like maybe he's really good for real life interactions and he shouldn't get sucked into social media stuff.
But you know what it is? I can tell you when we talk about this, it's also parents wanting their kid to be popular.
Yes, 1000%.
To be popular. And I hate to say that.
I think that's another, not to beat a dead horse, but like that's part of our reflection. Like, why do we care if they're left out at this? Like if they have a few friends and they have a Like,
And they're happy.
they're having generally a good time. Who cares if they have a sad moment of not getting included or they didn't hear about that? It doesn't matter. Oh, wait, it does. Why? It's killing me. Why is it killing you? Like, what about this scenario is hurting you? Let's get to the bottom of that. That reflection lets us let go of a lot of the like clinging to like, I want this ease of popularity right now.
But I think to your point, Molly, it's the parents.
Well, it's a lot of also the impact that a person's childhood has had on them and their decision making. Some good, some bad, but it's how they maybe felt left out as a child.
Yeah.
And they don't want that feeling for their own, which is there's nothing wrong with it, but it's a slippery slope.
Yeah. It's really painful to think about our kids feeling lonely or left out. But those are two different things. A lonely kid is a problem.
If you step back and you look at all your different families, what do you see? And again, this is, there's no judgment, but where do you see those pitfalls really happening?
I think that the biggest pitfall is and I am right there with everyone, but we just want to fix the feelings so darn badly. We just want to fix the feelings. And if those feelings are hard because we want to throw the party or, call the parent or do the homework or bring the uniform, like whatever it is, it's really hard to sit there and know that you probably can fix the feelings temporarily and not do it. So I think it's a pitfall, but a totally understandable one. And then I think broadly, if you think about relationship reflection, regulation, rules, and repair, and you zoom out and you say, okay, those are the 5 most influential areas on our kids' development that we have control over. There are plenty of things that we don't have control over or that we can help bolster in our kids in terms of skills. But for what we have control over, and some of those I'm going to be better at than others. So like, I bet each of the 3 of us are going to have a different strength in those 5 categories. So I'm never thinking about relationship, to be honest. I'm good with relationship with my kids. Like, that's fine. I'm not as good at maybe setting the limits. Like maybe rules is where I'm like, oh God, okay, fine. So that's the one that I have to work on. Or maybe I'm not great at making repairs. So that's my little pitfall that I can strengthen. But I'm really good at setting rules. So I think it's more like not everybody's general pitfall, but more like what is
kind of isolating.
Yeah, like what's your weak spot? And it's usually the one that either annoys you the most, let's say of those 5. It's like, which one is like, that's a throwaway, Like if reflection is a throwaway one, you're not reflecting much.
Right.
Yeah.
You kind of got to reflect. College, getting into college.
Yeah.
Navigating.
It's that time of year.
We're waiting for all of it to come out. Some have gotten ED. How can you help parents? Because it's as much about the parents as it is the kid.
It sure is. It's another one of those things where it's like our kids need to know, the first thing they need to know, I mean, they always need to know this, but especially during college stuff, is that their value is not remotely linked to the achievement of getting into college.
Can you say that again?
That's so important.
It's so important. And that their love from us, our love for them, is not dependent on whatever the splendor of the college admissions is or whatever the disappointment of the college admissions is. Our love is the same either way.
The decision doesn't change any of it.
Nothing. And also, we are there for them for the like worst rejection potentially that they're going to feel or the most excitement that they're going to feel, but without,
judgment
being more, like if they get rejected and we had our heart set on them getting in either because that school was really, we were so into that school or because we just so desperately don't want to see them in pain, we have to check ourselves and make sure that we're not adding fuel. Like if they're upset and then we're equally or more upset, then they aren't going to have that sense of like there will be a path.
Yeah.
It's not the one we had our hopes on, but there's going to be a path. And then on the other side of it, like the excitement. Like I have a video, these are terrible. Like I can't believe they do this, but these young people today tend to videotape their reading their letters.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
It's so upsetting. So
When they don't know
when they don't know the outcome, they
God.
do.
I could never.
They do videos,
But they don't live stream it.
No, they just do it for themselves
yeah.
for a record. So if they get in, they have a record. If they get deferred, if they get rejected, it's awful.
It's awful.
So when my daughter went through this, she was like, "I'm not going to do that. I'm not doing that." And then at the last minute, and she also was like, "I'm not opening it in front of anybody but my sister." Like she just didn't want her parents around. She just was like, I need to keep it like calm. And so then she at the 11th hour came into the kitchen to do it in front of all of us. And she put her phone up to videotape her reaction. And in the background, when I've watched it many times, but in the background, you can see I look so like, you won't understand this till you go through it, but I had this like all the mom feelings of like, I want to be both excited for her, but also not feel like this is the most important moment in the world. I'm trying to remain calm, but I don't want her to feel like I'm not appreciating
all your hats
it.
on.
All of them. And I just look like the reaction of everyone else is so dramatic. And I am sitting there spinning into
it's
like.
almost like you don't want to react.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that I totally look like I looked like a person who had no feelings whatsoever. It was terrifying.
I need to see this video.
It was really funny just because, and I also was like in sweatpants. So I'm like, what is happening? I just look like a very haggard, disturbed mother.
That's real
But
life.
it was really, I was fighting the feelings of like having, like, let them have their reaction. High, happy, low, sad. And we are like available to receive it. But the minute you give too much or too little, like it's hard. That's all I have to say about college.
Let's pivot a little bit. We have 3 children each. They're all very different. And I parent them pretty much all the same, except, Brooks calls Gray fat. Brooks says Gray's my favorite. You love him the most. He's the baby. Scarlett, she sometimes goes either way. How do you parent different children?
Well, I do like to think about temperament, and I like to think about ours and our kids. And I use Dr. Thomas Boyce is a researcher who talks about orchids and dandelions, and then researchers added tulips. You can think of whatever flower you want, but the metaphor to me is like orchid kids who are like, I think it's something in the 33% of kids have this temperament of like, they thrive and blossom and are so magnificent when they're given the right environment, the right sunlight, water, and soil. But when they don't get it, they wither. Whereas a dandelion is probably growing through the sidewalk cracks at just like a little bit of rain, a little bit of sunlight.
It's your third child. Your dandelion is your third child.
So when you know that, you can know an orchid kid needs a little more structure, a little more predictability, a little bit more support of the sensory overload in the world.
That is Brooks.
A little bit better sleep, a little bit, they tend to get hangry, for example. Like you just know what they need. So you're not changing your parenting, but you're paying a little bit closer attention to sort of the day-to-day needs. And you might also notice that when they get dysregulated, which probably happens more often, that you're really exercising, like trying to regulate yourself so that you can be there for them in a way that's different than with, a dandelion kid who might like storm off and you're like, neither of us cares and I'll see them in 2 minutes. And
2 minutes. He's always happy until he's mad and he's like, oh, he'll be back in 2 minutes.
Yeah. So that to me is like your parenting, your values are the same. Like your North Star of like, what matters to me, what matters to this family, what do my kids need? But you might, from your day-to-day perspective, have to pay a little closer attention, not walk on eggshells, but just be mindful that some people, like background noise to me is just, I can't stand it. Like I can't stand it. And my kids make fun of this so much. And I think it's one of those things where it could put me in a real pissy mood. And then I'm just like rude. I'm rude.
When you say background noise, you mean like the TV in the background?
Like TV in the background.
Like
anything
noise,
that's like extra.
Oh my God,
Like
see, I
what
love background
annoys
noise.
me when I'm like trying to work or I'm trying and
Yeah, well, some people
the doorbell rings over and over to the point where I'm like, I cannot think. And then I lose my train of
Exactly.
thought. I'm on a Zoom. I'll get up and that's why I'm like, why do I work out of my home?
But that's a perfect example. Like if you know that about yourself.
I know.
And you were raising yourself, not just, you would not work from home.
No.
Because you'd be like, this brings out a side of me I don't need to bring
I'm
out.
trying to focus and I'm trying to
Right.
get, I've set boundaries in terms of like, I started the company and I don't want it to bleed after 3 or 4
Right.
o'clock. So I'm trying from like, 8:10, 8:15 until when I drop them off to be really productive.
Right.
And it's hard.
How important is it for us to apologize though? Because I do think that sometimes like I will, and I've gotten a lot better. I know my triggers are in the morning when I'm trying to get out the door for school and I will lose my shit. And I think I actually, again, I listen to your podcast religiously. It was an episode where you were like owning your mistakes and apologizing. Like how important is that to our children to hear us apologize? And do we need to do it all the time or just in like certain moments? Because sometimes us losing our shit is part of parenting.
Our losing our shit is part of parenting, for sure. But it's also part of being a person. So like while we want to teach them self-regulation and respect and compassion, all those things, we also need to teach them that people make mistakes, that they can own up to those mistakes and they can keep working on it. And that it's not the end of the relationship, it's not the end of the world. And so that's why I think an apology can be very effective because it's like, hey, I don't like that I blew up at you this morning. Not with the, if you had been on time, I wouldn't have, but just like, that's on me.
Yeah.
And we're going to let's talk about like how to make our mornings go more smoothly. And I love you. So you're not saying you should now be late because it's me that loses my temper and that's the problem. But you are saying like, I don't like that, but it did happen and I want to acknowledge it. I don't think you always need to because I think repair doesn't have to be an apology. It can just be reconnection. It's like you see each other after school, you were going to say something, but then you're laughing about things are good and you don't need to. It's a given.
They've moved on.
They've moved on. You've moved on. And, it's the same thing again with partners where you might like be snippy with each other, but then you kind of start laughing at the same, stand-up comedy and then you get a little closer and are holding hands again. And it's like, you don't need to say, I'm sorry I was snippy with you. You can just, you are by
Your actions speak louder.
reconnecting.
Yeah.
One last question, or this is going to be a 2-part.
A 7-hour episode.
Like they all are.
Making mistakes.
Yeah.
Brooks went through, a bit of time where he was very worried about making a mistake. I think kids today are worried because I think they feel like, A, they're going to be punished. They're going to be canceled. How, as parents, can we help navigate that for them? Because I always say, I'm like, have fun at school, be kind, be a leader. And then I say, and make mistakes.
Yeah.
He always looks at me and I'm like, he'll dart his eyes. But I'm like, if you don't make mistakes, he always wants to play it safe.
Well, I think also showing them like I just took a risk. I made a mistake. Here's what I learned. And I survived.
And you survived.
And I survived. And sometimes I didn't learn anything. I just survived.
Yeah.
But I think when we live that way and we're not perfect and they see that, we're not trying to pretend and like go behind closed doors and make our mistakes, it goes miles. And then also for the kids who are perfectionistic, it's more important not to praise them for the outcomes, the perfect outcome. Like you want to focus on something that had nothing to do with the end game.
Getting into college.
Like getting into college.
Going to do a little rapid fire. What is your go-to comfort food, Dr. Pressman?
My go-to comfort food is like pizza. I'm very simple.
What's the last show you binge watched?
What is that show? No, Nobody Wants This.
Oh, it's so good.
What's one parenting hack you swear by?
Saying nothing.
What's your guilty pleasure song?
Don't stop me now.
What's a quote or mantra you live by?
All feelings are welcome. All behaviors are not.
What's your go-to cocktail?
Oh my gosh. This is humiliating. but it's so good, an espresso martini.
Oh, no. People love an espresso martini.
No, it's just so cheesy, but it's so good.
If you weren't in your current career, what would you be doing?
I would be an agent.
You would be a damn good
I just
agent.
like telling other people how awesome someone else is.
I love that. You're amazing. You're truly exceptional. You guys, get her book, The 5 Principles of Parenting. Get
on
it,
my coffee
read
table,
it,
just so you know.
Reread it. I have it everywhere. It's so good. Make sure and listen to her podcast, Raising Good Humans, and follow at Raising Good Humans podcast.
This is a little tip for if you want to go down the rabbit hole of Aliza's podcast. This is what I do. If I'm going through something, I go down the library of the Apple podcast to see, because all of your subjects tell you like what your titles tell what you're dealing with. And it is so helpful. It is like having a personal therapy session in your car with you.
Thank you. I put on my website very recently, like I tried to divide by topic and age in case of that very thing.
Yeah.
Like you just want.
But if you go to her
so
show,
helpful.
you can see the list, the titles.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, and that's how people
That's how I find the episodes I need.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's really good. We love you.
You guys, I love
that
you
was
too.
So
Thank
fun.
you.
That was so fun. It's another one in the books.
Another one in the books. I might have
know.
sniffled a few times. Sorry,
That's
guys.
all right. I feel like we're gonna be a better parent.
Thanks for listening to Lipstick on the Rim with Molly Sims and my ride or die, Emisha Gormley. We're so excited to bring you guys along on this journey with us. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at Lipstick on the Rim and at Molly B. Sims. Or you can go to my blog where you can dive just a little bit deeper into my favorite products, trends, and more at mollysims.substack.com. And don't forget to check out our video episodes on my YouTube channel, Molly Sims. This podcast is a production with Sony Music. I wanted to give a special thanks to my team, Rosie Cummings, Kenna Ryan, Sophie Kevorkian, and everyone at Sony Music. Don't forget to listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss out on the fun.